I want you to picture it. You know the scene. We all do. The fires of Mount Doom, the desperate struggle on the precipice, the flash of sharp teeth and a severed finger tumbling into the lava. And then, release. A great shuddering exhalation across the whole of Middle-earth. The tower of Barad-dûr, that needle of malice piercing the sky, crumbles into dust. The ground swallows the armies of Mordor. The great eye, wreathed in flame, that symbol of sleepless vigilance and absolute will, collapses in on itself and is blown away on a wind of despair. It's the end. The definitive, triumphant, capital E end. Sauron is defeated, the world is saved, the credits roll, the music soars, and we are left with the deep, satisfying certainty that the shadow has passed. And for all intents and purposes, this is true. The reign of the Dark Lord is over. The fourth age of Middle-earth can begin, an age of men, free from the dominion of a tyrant godling. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Here's the detail that gets lost in the sheer cinematic grandeur of that victory. Tolkien never said he was gone. Defeated, yes, utterly, comprehensively, and permanently. But gone? No, not in the way we understand it. Not in the way a mortal man dies and leaves the circles of the world. The ring was destroyed, and with it, the vast majority of Sauron's power, his native strength that he had poured into its making. But Sauron himself, the being, the spirit, the consciousness that was once named Maiar, the Admirable, a servant of the great smith Aula. That being was not annihilated. Its fate was something else. Something stranger, something that when you truly sit with it, and is in some ways more terrifying than simple oblivion. Tolkien tells us what happened in his letters, in footnotes, in the appendices. He describes Sauron as being reduced to a spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows, but can never again grow or take shape. Think about that phrase for a moment. Not erased, not banished to some otherworldly prison like his master Morgoth. Reduced. Diminished to a single impotent function, to gnaw, to be a disembodied, powerless rage, aware of its own defeat, forever. What we are about to uncover is not a revision of the story, not some fan theory that claims Sauron is coming back. He isn't. The victory of the Fellowship was real, and it was absolute. But what we are going to explore is the nature of that victory, and the true nature of the evil they fought. By digging into what it means for a being like Sauron, an immortal Maiar, to be scattered, we discover a deeper, more unsettling truth about Middle-earth. A truth that suggests the fight against evil is never truly over, because evil itself is never truly gone. It just changes form. It becomes a memory, a stain, a potentiality that lingers in the very fabric of the world. So the question isn't, did they win? The question is, what did they win? What does it mean to live in a world that has been saved but not entirely cleansed? What happens to the ghost of a god? That is the journey we're on today, and I promise you, by the end, you will never look at the fall of Barad-dûr in the same way again. It wasn't just an ending, it was a transformation. Let's establish the baseline. What do we see, and what are we told? In the climax of The Lord of the Rings, the narrative perspective is crucial here. We are with Frodo and Sam, then with Aragorn and Gandalf. We see the physical manifestations of Sauron's fall. From the slopes of Mount Doom, Samwise Gamgee watches the cataclysm. He sees towers and battlements, tall as hills, founded upon a mighty mountain throne above immeasurable pits, great courts and dungeons, eyeless prisons, sheer as cliffs, and gaping gates of steel and adamant. And then he sees it all come crashing down. This is destruction on a geological scale. Simultaneously, at the Black Gate, the captains of the West watch as a vast shadow, terrible but powerless, rises from the ruins of Mordor, reaches out with a desperate, grasping hand towards them, and is then swept away by a great wind from the west. It is a moment of pure, symbolic catharsis. The shadow, the physical representation of Sauron's dominion, is literally blown away. Gandalf declares, "The realm of Sauron is ended. The ring-bearer has fulfilled his quest." And he's right. The realm is ended. The dominion is ended. The threat is ended. The language is precise. It speaks of power structures, of political and military realities. It does not, if you look closely, speak of personal annihilation. This is our first clue, the first crack in the clean, simple story of total destruction. The mainstream understanding, shaped heavily by Peter Jackson's masterful cinematic adaptation, reinforces this sense of finality. The great eye implodes, the shockwave flattens everything, the Nazgûl are unmade in fire. It feels like a cleansing fire, a scouring of evil from the world. But Tolkien's world operates on older, deeper rules than our own. Its metaphysics are as complex and as important as its geography. For Tolkien, a devout Catholic, the concepts of spirit, will, and existence were not metaphorical. They were foundational, and in his universe you cannot simply kill a being like Sauron. He is not a man. He is not an orc. He is a Maiar, an angelic spirit who existed before the world was even made. He is part of the world's very architecture. To understand his fate, we have to look beyond the narrative of the novel itself and into the letters Tolkien wrote to curious readers, to his publisher, to his son Christopher. These letters are where he worked through the theological and metaphysical underpinnings of his creation. It's here that the story gets richer and darker. In letter 200, he is explicit. He writes that after the ring's destruction, Sauron would be a mere spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows. In another, letter 131, he elaborates. He explains that Sauron's investment of his own power into the ring was so great that its destruction meant he could never again cohere. He says his spirit was reduced to a vanishing point. A vanishing point, not zero. A point so small it is almost nothing, but it is still there. This is a critical distinction. It's the difference between a debt being paid and a debt being forgiven. One leaves a clean slate, the other leaves a record. Sauron's record, his spiritual signature, remains. He is, as Tolkien puts it, irrevocably diminished. His fall is calamitous and final, but he still is. He is a presence, however faint, a whisper in a silent room, a cold spot on a summer's day. This is where the story deepens. The victory wasn't about erasing Sauron from the cosmic ledger. It was about rendering him permanently, irreversibly impotent. It was about breaking his ability to act upon the world he so desperately wished to control. And this raises a profound question. What is worse? To cease to be or to be forever as nothing more than a disembodied, hateful memory, aware of your own failure for all of eternity? The fall of Barad-dûr wasn't an execution. It was a sentencing, a life sentence. To truly grasp the strangeness of Sauron's fate, we need to zoom out, way out, before the hobbits, before the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor, before the elves even awoke by the starlit waters of Cuiviénen. We need to go back to the music of the Ainur, the creation myth that stands at the beginning of all of Tolkien's legendarium. In the beginning there was Eru Ilúvatar, the One, and he created the Ainur, the Holy Ones, primordial spirits born of his thought. They were, for all intents and purposes, angels. Some were greater, the Valar, the powers of the world who descended into the created universe, Arda, to shape it and govern it. and some were lesser, the Maiar, spirits of the same order but of a lower degree, who came to be the assistants, the servants, the followers of the Valar. Osa, who loved the storms of the sea, was a Maiar. So was Melian, the queen who wove a protective enchantment around the elven kingdom of Doriath, and so were the 5 wizards sent to Middle-earth, including Gandalf and Saruman. And so, too, was Sauron. His original name was Mairon, and he was a servant of Aule the smith, the Vala, who delighted in the substances of the earth, in craft, in making. Mairon was said to be the greatest of Aule's Maiar, and he learned more about craft and substance than any other. This is the origin of his power, his obsession with order, with forging, with bending the very matter of the world to his will. The key thing to understand about the Ainur, both Valar and Maiar, is that they are not biological beings. They are spirits. Their physical forms, their fanar as the elves called them, are merely clothing. They are garments of flesh they weave for themselves to interact with the physical world. Gandalf's old man body, Sauron's fair form in the Second Age, the terrifying Dark Lord in his black armor, these are all just projections, avatars for a consciousness that is fundamentally non-physical and immortal. Their existence is tied not to a body, but to the existence of Arda itself. They can't die in the mortal sense. Their spirits cannot be extinguished. So what happens when their physical form is destroyed? For most Maiar, it's a temporary inconvenience. Gandalf's body is slain by the Balrog on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, but his spirit, Olorin, endures. He is sent back by Eru, clothed in new power as Gandalf the White. His mission wasn't over, so he was given another chance, another body. Now consider Saruman. After his defeat at Isengard and his pathetic end in the Shire, his body is stabbed by Grima Wormtongue. The hobbits watch as his spirit rises from the corpse, a grey mist, and it looks to the west, towards the home of the Valar. But from the west comes a cold wind that blows it away. Saruman's spirit is denied re-entry. He is now a naked, homeless spirit, unable to take form, unable to return home, undoomed to wander Middle-earth, impotent and forgotten. This is a step closer to Sauron's fate. It shows us that the spirits of the Maiar can be diminished, can be rendered powerless, they can be cast out, but they are not destroyed. They linger. Now let's turn to Sauron. He lost his physical form multiple times. First, in the downfall of Númenor, the great island kingdom he had corrupted. The island sank beneath the waves in a cataclysm wrought by Eru himself, and Sauron's body was destroyed. But his spirit, borne on a dark wind, fled back to Mordor. Because he still possessed the One Ring, his anchor, he was able to slowly, painfully, fashion a new body for himself, no longer fair, but terrible and black. Then, at the end of the Second Age, in the War of the Last Alliance, his body was slain again by Elendil and Gil-galad. But again, his spirit endured. For 2,500 years it lay dormant, slowly gathering strength until it could begin to take shape again, first as the necromancer in Dol Guldur, and finally returning to Mordor. Twice his body was destroyed. Twice his spirit survived and rebuilt. What was different the third time? The ring. The One Ring is more than just a magical object of invisibility and power. It is a phylactery. It is a Horcrux. It is an external hard drive containing the source code of Sauron's soul. In the Second Age, Sauron realized that to dominate the wills of the most powerful beings in Middle-earth, the elves, and specifically the bearers of the other rings of power, he needed to exert an overwhelming force of will, but his own spiritual energy, his own native power as a Maiar, was not infinite. To achieve the level of control he desired, he had to concentrate his power, focus it, and pour it into an external vessel. This was an act of profound metaphysical engineering. As Tolkien wrote, Sauron invested a great part of his own inherent power into the ring. This act had two enormous consequences. The first, and the one Sauron intended, was that it magnified his ability to dominate. With the ring, his will could reach across the continent, command legions, and bend the minds of kings. It made him stronger, more focused, more effective. He became Lord of the Rings, and therefore Lord of Middle-earth. But there was a second, unintended consequence, a terrible vulnerability. By placing so much of his being outside of himself, he had created a single point of failure. His spirit was now tied to the fate of a physical object. The ring became his anchor to the physical world, the focal point through which he could cohere, take form, and exert his will. It was the lens that allowed the light of his spirit to burn with focused intensity. As long as the ring existed, he could never be truly defeated. His body could be broken, his armies scattered, but his spirit would always have a homing beacon, a place to return to, a source from which to draw the power to rebuild. This is why the War of the Last Alliance, for all its heroism, was an incomplete victory. Isildur cut the ring from Sauron's hand, but he did not destroy it. And so Sauron's spirit, though grievously wounded and diminished, survived. It fled into the east, hiding, waiting, slowly regathering its dissipated strength over millennia, always tethered to the world by the continued existence of the ring. The free peoples thought they had won, but all they had done was press pause. The real war, the one that would decide the fate of the world, was not against Sauron's armies or his fortress. It was against that single, small object of gold. Now, imagine the reverse. Imagine what happens when that anchor is destroyed, when that vast portion of his being, invested with such craft and malice in the fires of Mount Doom, is itself unmade in those same fires. It is not just the destruction of a weapon, it is the destruction of a part of his soul. All the power he had externalized is suddenly, violently annihilated. The shock of this spiritual amputation is catastrophic. The lens shatters. The homing beacon goes dark. The source code is erased. Without the ring, the remaining part of his spirit, the part that was still him, has nothing to hold on to. It has lost the core of its strength, the very thing that allowed it to impose its will on physical reality. It's like a powerful magnet that has been superheated past its Curie point, losing its magnetism forever. The potential is still there in the atoms, but the alignment, the thing that gave it power, is gone and can never be recovered. This is the state we find him in at the moment the ring is unmade. A spirit suddenly and violently shorn of the majority of its power, a consciousness that has just lost its anchor, its focus, and its ability to ever again build a body or exert its will. It is cast adrift. And this is where we must move from analysis to speculation to try and imagine the sheer horror of that final moment. Let us, for a moment, step away from the text and engage in a piece of structured imagination. This is not canon, but an attempt to feel the weight of what Tolkien describes. Let's imagine the last second of Sauron's existence as a coherent being. He is not just an eye in a tower. That is a projection, a symbol of his will. He is a consciousness, a mind, pervading all of Mordor, his will the mortar in the stones of Barad-dûr, his thought the command in the minds of his captains. He is stretched thin, his focus absolute, directed at the army before his gate, at the mind of Aragorn, at the wills of the captains of the West. He is winning. The trap has been sprung. His victory is seconds away. And then something goes wrong. A flicker. A disturbance from the one place in his domain he has left unguarded, a place so beneath his notice, so wrapped in his own power, that he cannot conceive of a threat originating there. It is a spike of agony in his very essence. The ring. Someone has claimed it. Not him. Another. A lesser will, a puny, insignificant creature. For a terrifying, infinitesimal fraction of a second, his entire being, his will that spans a continent, is forced to retract, to focus with blinding speed on the chamber of Sammath Nar. He sees it, he understands. The sheer, world-ending stupidity of his oversight crashes down upon him. And in that moment of horrified realization, he is no longer the Dark Lord, the God-King of Middle-earth. He is Maiar, the proud craftsman, seeing his life's work, the single greatest creation of his entire immortal existence, about to be tossed into the fire by a grubby little halfling. Rage, a rage beyond measure, a rage that is pure and black and absolute. He pours everything he is into one final command. Stop. But it's too late. The connection snaps. And then comes the unmaking. It is not a sound. It is not a light. It is a sensation of being torn apart from the inside out. Imagine a tapestry woven over millennia, each thread a thought, a plan, a memory of power. Now imagine a fire starting in the central thread, the one thread that gives the entire pattern its meaning, and instantly incinerating it, causing the entire tapestry to unravel into a meaningless cloud of disconnected fibers. The power he had poured into the ring doesn't return to him. It vanishes. It is unmade. And the void it leaves behind creates a vacuum that rips his remaining spirit to shreds. His consciousness, once a single focused point of malevolent will, is shattered into a billion pieces. His memory of power, his knowledge of craft, his ambition, his pride, it all flies apart. What is left is the barest, most fundamental substrate of his being, the core emotion that had driven him for an age. Malice, pure, undiluted, impotent malice. The shadow that rises above Mordor is not a final act of defiance. It is a death spasm. It is the last incoherent shriek of a mind being scattered across the winds. The grasping hand is not a threat. It is the instinctual, meaningless gesture of a being that has already ceased to be a coherent self. It is reaching for a power that is no longer there. It is a ghost limb, twitching after the body is dead. And then the wind from the west, the clean air of the Valar, comes, and it doesn't destroy him. It simply disperses him. It blows the cloud of spiritual dust away, or scattering it so thinly across the world that it can never again coalesce. He is now everywhere and nowhere, a faint stain in the air, a bitter taste on the wind, a lingering chill in the shadows of the world. He has become an evil memory, aware of itself, but unable to do anything but remember and hate. Forever. This is the state Tolkien describes. This is what it means to be reduced, not to be nothing, but to be a nothingness that is aware. The cells of a dead god, scattered, each one screaming its own name into a void that will never answer. It is a state of eternal conscious failure, an unending internal gnawing. Let's return to the exact phrasing, because with Tolkien, the specific words always matter. Letter 200. Sauron was reduced to a spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows. Let's break that down, piece by piece, because each word carries immense theological and philosophical weight. First, reduced. This is not destroyed or banished. It implies a process of diminution, of lessening. He was once a great thing, a Maiar of Aule, a being of immense creative power. Then he was the Dark Lord, a being of immense destructive and coercive power. Now he is less. He has been stripped of his complexity, his abilities, his very identity, until only one single quality remains. He is a simplified equation. All the variables have been removed, leaving only a negative integer. Second, a spirit. This confirms he was not annihilated. His essence, his fiat, to use the elvish term, persists. He remains a spiritual entity, but one without a body, without a connection to the physical world, and without the means to ever create one again. And he has become what Saruman became, but infinitely more diminished because of his reliance on the ring. Saruman was just a homeless spirit. Sauron is a shattered one. He has been fundamentally broken at the aphysical level. His very spiritual DNA has been corrupted and then snapped. He cannot heal. He cannot grow. He can only be what he now is. Third, of malice. This is the core of it. Of all the things he was, a craftsman, a planner, a lord, a sorcerer, a deceiver, the only thing left is malice. His desire for order, which was his original, arguably non-evil motivation, has long since curdled into a pure, obsessive hatred for all things he cannot control, for the works of the Valar, for the freedom of the children of Iluvatar, and now, most of all, for himself. His defining characteristic is no longer ambition or a will to power, but a sour, spiteful resentment. It is the final, pathetic destination of all pride. It is the spiritual equivalent of a black hole, possessing only a gravitational pull of negativity, but with no mass, no substance. It is hate for the sake of hate. And finally, the most chilling part, that gnaws itself in the shadows. This is not a passive state. It is an active, eternal torment. The verb to gnaw suggests a constant, repetitive, self-devouring action. He is trapped in a feedback loop of his own hatred. His consciousness, now powerless to affect the outside world, turns its full, unblinking attention inward. He is forced to contemplate his own failure, his own impotence, his own reduction for all time. The shadows are his prison, but the gnawing is the torture. He is both the prisoner and the jailer. He is his own hell. This is a fate far more in line with a kind of Dante-esque theological justice than simple destruction. Tolkien, a man deeply concerned with the concepts of grace, pity, and damnation, crafted a fate for his ultimate villain that was not merely a defeat, but a perfect and eternal punishment tailored to his crime. Sauron's great sin was pride, a belief in his own supreme will. His punishment is to be left with nothing but that will, turned forever inward on itself, with nothing to enact it upon. He wanted to be the absolute center of the world. Now he is a non-entity at its periphery. He wanted to bind all things to himself. Now he is unbound from everything. He wanted eternal life to enact his designs. Now he has eternal life in which to contemplate his failure. It is a perfect, symmetrical, and horrifying damnation. The world is safe from him, not because he is gone, but because he is now locked inside a prison of his own shattered consciousness, a prison from which there is no escape, because it is made of himself. He has become a living monument to the consequences of his own choices. So Sauron is defeated, reduced, and locked in his own personal hell. The world is safe. The age of men begins. But does this mean his influence, the echo of his malice, is gone from Middle-earth? Absolutely not. This is perhaps the most unsettling implication of his scattering. A concentrated evil is one thing. You can fight it, you can name it, you can lay siege to its fortress. But a dispersed evil? An evil that has been turned from a solid into a gas, permeating the very atmosphere? That's a different problem altogether. Tolkien gives us direct evidence of this. The most obvious example is the malice of the ring itself. The ring is gone, But the evil it wrought upon its bearers doesn't just vanish. Frodo Baggins is the clearest example. He is the hero who saved the world, but he is not saved himself. He is plagued by the memory of the ring, by the wound from the Morgul knife, by the sting of Shelob. He says to Sam, "I am wounded. Wounded. It will never really heal." On the anniversaries of his traumas, he is sick and tormented. The malice of Sauron, channeled through his greatest creation, has left a permanent scar on Frodo's soul. It's a piece of that gnawing that has broken off and embedded itself in the hero. Frodo's only path to peace is to leave Middle-earth entirely, to sail into the West, where, perhaps, the grace of the Valar can finally heal him. He won the war for the world, but lost his own internal peace. The malice lingers in him, but it's not just in people, it's in the land itself. Mordor, even after Sauron's fall, is not suddenly transformed into a paradise. The epilogue to The Lord of the Rings, which Tolkien chose not to publish but which reveals his thinking, describes the lands of Mordor as still being barren and poisoned for a great many years. The evil that saturated that place, the product of millennia of Sauron's will being exerted upon the very rock and soil, does not simply evaporate. It has to be cleansed, slowly, over time, by the natural healing processes of the world and by the hard work of good people. King Elisar, Aragorn, and the people of Gondor have to actively work to reclaim and purify these lands. The victory at the Black Gate didn't solve the problem. It just made it possible for the solution to begin. And then there are the orcs and the other foul creatures. They are not all destroyed in the cataclysm. Many are, but many more scatter, leaderless and terrified. They become a disorganized but still dangerous menace. They are no longer a great army marching under a single will, but they are now packs of desperate, hateful marauders hiding in the mountains and dark places of the world. They are the scattered remnants of Sauron's will, a lingering poison. The fight isn't over for the men of the Fourth Age. It has just become a different kind of fight. It's no longer a grand war against a Dark Lord. It's a long, hard, unglamorous job of policing, rebuilding, and cleansing. It is the slow, patient work of weeding a garden that has been overrun with poison. This is a profound statement about the nature of evil. Defeating a tyrant doesn't instantly erase the culture of tyranny. Destroying a weapon doesn't heal the wounds it caused. The shadow of Sauron's malice remains not as a coherent will, but as a stain, an influence, a lingering corruption that the next generations must contend with. The world is safer, yes, but it is not safe. The potential for darkness, the memory of the great evil, has been woven into the fabric of the world. And this leads us to the great revelation, the pivot in our understanding of what the victory truly meant. We have arrived at the core insight. The entire journey, from the fall of the tower to the metaphysics of the Maiar, has been building to this single, uncomfortable, but ultimately more hopeful truth. The victory over Sauron was not the eradication of evil from the world. It was the transformation of evil from a singular, focused entity into a diffuse, latent potentiality. Sauron, the individual, was rendered utterly and permanently impotent. But the evil he represented, the malice he embodied, was not removed from the equation of Arda. It was scattered, it was broken down and recycled into the system. Think of it like this. Before, evil was a glacier, a single, immense, unstoppable force, carving its way across the landscape, crushing everything in its path. The Fellowship's quest was to find the one weak point, the one thermal vent that could shatter that glacier. And they succeeded. The glacier is gone. But what is left? 1,000,000 tons of meltwater flooding into the rivers, seeping into the soil. changing the water table for the entire continent. The immediate, overwhelming threat is gone, but the consequences are now everywhere, integrated into the very environment. You no longer have to worry about the glacier, but you do have to worry about the flood, about the contaminated soil, about the change in the climate. The struggle has changed from one of apocalyptic confrontation to one of constant, everyday vigilance. This is a far more realistic and mature understanding of the nature of good and evil than the simple kill the monster narrative. Tolkien is not telling us a fairy tale where, once the dragon is slain, everyone lives happily ever after. He is telling us a history, and in history, victories are never absolute. The fall of one empire creates a power vacuum that gives rise to new conflicts. The end of one war plants the seeds of the next. This is the human condition, translated into the language of myth. Sauron's scattered malice becomes the source of all the lesser evils that will plague Middle-earth in the ages to come. The petty tyrants, the greedy kings, the rise of cults, the wars between men, they are no longer orchestrated by a single dark lord. They arise from the darkness that already exists within the hearts of men. Sauron's role in the world is finished. He can no longer act. But the idea of Sauron, the potential for a lust for power, for a desire to dominate others, for the use of technology and industry to crush the natural world, that remains. He is the precedent. He is the ghost that haunts the future. He is no longer a player on the board, but his memory, his stain, still influences the game. This reframes the entire purpose of the War of the Ring. The goal was not to create a perfect world free from all strife. That is impossible. The goal was to restore the balance. It was to remove the overwhelming supernatural weight of Sauron's will from one side of the scales, so that the free peoples of the world could have a fighting chance, so that their choices would matter again. Gandalf says it himself. Sauron's quest is for a power that will be in no way subject to others, but in this matter, it is not his own will, but the will of others that will defeat him. The victory was not the destruction of a will, but the liberation of all other wills. It was the restoration of moral agency to the world, and this is where we find our pivot. The story isn't actually about how to destroy evil. It's about how to live in a world where evil can never be fully destroyed. The answer isn't found in a magic ring or a king's sword. It's found in a small, unassuming hero who understood this truth all along. The real counterpoint to Sauron's lingering, impotent malice is not Aragorn's glorious reign, nor the undying light of the elves sailing into the west. The true antithesis, the real remedy to the scattered shadow, is found in the Shire. It is found in the work of Samwise Gamgee. When the four hobbits return home, they do not find a peaceful land untouched by the war. They find the Shire corrupted, industrialized, ruled by petty thugs under the command of the diminished Saruman, who is himself a faint echo of the evil of Sauron. The trees are cut down, the fields are barren, the people are oppressed. It is a microcosm of Sauron's vision for all of Middle-earth, a world of broken wills and despoiled nature. This is the scouring of the Shire, a chapter many find jarring and one that was tragically omitted from the films. But it is arguably the most important chapter in the entire book, because it is here that Tolkien shows us the true nature of victory. The hobbits don't defeat this evil by finding another magic weapon. They defeat it by rallying their community, by rediscovering their courage, and by fighting not for some grand abstract ideal, but for their home. They win back their country inch by bloody inch. But even then, the victory is not complete. The land is scarred. The people are weary. And this is where our overlooked hero, Samwise the gardener, provides the final answer. Galadriel had given him a small box containing dust from her own enchanted orchard and a single silver nut from a malorn tree. She told him that, "For you, little gardener and lover of trees, I have only a small gift. But this small gift holds the key." After the fighting is done, Sam doesn't rest. He walks the length and breadth of the Shire, and in every place a tree has been cut down, in every garden that has been spoiled, he places a tiny grain of Galadriel's dust, and the land begins to heal. The trees he plants grow faster and more beautiful than any had before, and in the center of the Shire, where the old party tree once stood, he plants the malon nut, and it grows into a great silver-barked tree, a symbol of hope and renewal, a piece of the undying lands made manifest in the heart of the hobbit's home. This is it. This is the answer to the question of the lingering shadow. Sauron's spirit is a force of pure, sterile malice. It gnaws, it resents, it corrupts, but it cannot create. It can only spoil what others have made. It is a force of anti-life. Samwise Gamgee, on the other hand, is a force of pure generative goodness. He is a gardener. His entire being is dedicated to nurturing, to cultivating, to helping things grow. He does not fight the shadow by trying to erase it. He fights it by planting a garden so vibrant, so full of life, that the shadows have nowhere to linger. He overcomes the memory of death by fostering an abundance of life. The true victory over Sauron is not the destruction of Barad-dûr, but the planting of the malorn tree. It is the act of creation in the face of uncreation. It is the patient, humble, often unnoticed work of healing and rebuilding. Aragorn can cleanse the land of Mordor, but Sam can make the Shire bloom. One is the work of a king, the other the work of a gardener. Both are necessary. But it is the gardener's work that truly lasts, because it is a legacy of life, not a legacy of war. Sauron was reduced to a spirit that gnaws itself. Samwise becomes the mayor of a town that feasts and sings. That is the final contrast. That is the real happy ending. It's not the absence of evil, it's the overwhelming, defiant, joyful presence of good. So, we return to where we began. The tower falls, the eye goes dark. But now we see it with new eyes. It is not the end of the story. It is the end of a chapter and the beginning of a new one with a new set of rules. The world of the Fourth Age is a world without overt magic, without gods and demons walking the earth in physical form. The elves are gone, the dwarves are dwindling, and the age of men has truly come. It is a world that looks much more like our own, and it is a world that has inherited a memory of a great evil. Sauron's scattered spirit is a metaphor for the scars of history. The great wars of our own world do not end when the treaties are signed. Their malice, their trauma, their ideological poisons linger for generations. They seep into the culture, into the politics, into the soil. We are always, in some way, living in the shadow of the wars that came before. The victory of the free peoples did not create a perfect world. It created a possible world, a world where goodness has a chance, where choices matter, where the humble work of a gardener can heal the wounds left by a dark lord. The knowledge that Sauron's spirit still exists, a faint, hateful whisper on the wind, is not meant to diminish the victory. It is meant to sanctify it. It reminds us that peace is not a permanent state of being. It is a continuous act of maintenance. It is a garden that must be tended. The fight is never over. It just becomes our fight. Tolkien's legendarium is often seen as a work of escapism, a flight into a fantasy world of clear-cut good and evil. But the deeper you dig, the more you realize it is a profound and deeply realistic meditation on the world we actually live in. It teaches us that evil is not a monster to be slain, but a persistent condition of a fallen world that must be constantly resisted, not with grand gestures of power, but with small, everyday acts of courage, kindness, and creation. The planting of a tree, the raising of a family, the telling of a story, the singing of a song, these are the weapons that defeat the lingering shadow. They are the acts that fill the world with so much light and life that the gnawing malice of a forgotten god has no place to take root. And what of Sauron? He remains, a cautionary tale, a spirit of pure failure, forever contemplating the victory of the small, simple things he so despised. He who sought to master the very substance of the world is now less than a ghost. And Samwise Gamgee, the humble gardener who just wanted to get home and see his Rosie, inherits the earth. That is the final justice of Tolkien's world. So, the next time you watch that scene, the next time you see the Tower of Barad-dûr crumble into dust, remember what you cannot see. Remember the silent, invisible scattering of a spirit, and the quiet, enduring truth that the real war is not against the tower, but for the garden that grows in its shadow. What do you think? Does this change how you see the ending? Let me know. The conversation is always the best part, and thank you for wondering with me.